sorry, I'm sniffing and.
No, I just hope you're okay. I'm just curious, how many students on average you have enrolled in each courses?
I'm very lucky. The minute my courses go online in the spring to register, within half an hour they're completed. Between 80 to 90 a year. I could even have many more, but they cap it. That there is an interest among students, and there's an interest. Sorry, because they're interested in global change. They're interested in male-female relationships. They're interested, but courses tend to be the old kind of courses. Like you showed me the Moravian books. It would be nice to have a course in Moravian theology, which is really interesting. Moravians are amazing. We don't have that. So there's lots of. We do. I teach a course on Zacharias Kunuk also on film. People just love it. I mean, they're just amazing. So the interest is there. Sorry to sniff and huff and puff. But yes,
I could ask you one question. If anyone wants to. I'm curious, so you have a lot of students who are interested in your courses. Are very many of your students Inuit or First Nations or Métis themselves? No. Okay.
No. I certainly don't have an Inuit student. We do have some at McGill. We have some First Nations. Sometimes the First Nations, as you know, they've been a little shy about it. I'm not allowed to ask a student, hey, are you indigenous? Can't do that, obviously. But if they want to tell me, they can. But some of them, because of their family history, they keep it quiet, right? But you know all about that, right? So McGill used to teach a lot of the teachers in the Eastern Arctic, and they used to come down to McGill for a year or two, and then it changed, and McGill came and gave classes in the north. I think some of that has now moved to Alberta, but I'm not sure, the University of Alberta. I'm not sure. But we used to do the teacher training. There used to be a social, oh, you were involved.
Yes, I'm a graduate of the McGill Northern
Studies.
Teacher Education Program.
Yes,
Yes,
Jack Cram.
yes,
Yes,
yes. So I am a graduate.
good.
I've got my BA from McGill through that program. And when the teacher education program left McGill, they went to University of Regina. And
Regina.
that was not very successful.
Oh, thank you.
Sad to say. But now there was Memorial. Yes, and so I've taught students, McGill students, but in Kuja,
Yes.
and I've taught students for Memorial Teacher Education, but in Happy Valley Rouge Bay.
Okay, good for you. So it really has come, helped you along the way. You've been happy with it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where it is at the moment. They moved it around. Is it Regina still?
No, Memorial.
Oh, it's Memorial. Okay. Anybody, Yuaka?
Do you have any connection or cooperation with the University of Finland?
Yes, I do personally with Peter Berliner. We have a University of the Arctic network on children and youth. And we've done a number of projects and some conferences and so on. However, as you may know, he's not going to be at the university there anymore. So it's in flux what the cooperation would be like. Also, though he teaches in Nuuk, he lives in Mexico, which is a little unusual. But, okay. All right, yes,
I'm sorry I was late. I'm Alison Worden from Alaska.
oh, yes.
So maybe you already covered it, but are you finding that the academia of poetry or creative writing, that they're reticent to accept Inuit authors, or they're not recognizing Inuit poets or authors or literature, or they just don't have them on the radar?
Who is recognizing them?
The academia, because I found that
Well, I think they mainly just don't know. They just don't know. I think once they would get to know, they'd probably recognize. I mean, I know at McGill they're starting to include some First Nations poets. I can't think of a single Inuit poet, that is included. But Alaska has done very well through Fairbanks and other places, and your community colleges are amazing. Well, you have a different vision, but that's okay. From the outside, they look better than we have sometimes. All right, well, yeah, Yuaka?
How do you teach your students? Do you make some analysis of the indigenous books?
They only read books by Inuit, and I supplemented a lot with watching films, television productions, APTN, Aboriginal People's Television Network, and they watch stuff from IBC. They go in, they watch I assign the ICC webpage and the ITK webpage and the Makovic webpage, because the web pages are actually where you get the most up-to-date stuff, right? If they're gonna go and find a book in the library about, I don't know, so let's say the whole question about women's sterilization, for example. I say that because you and I were talking about that. They're not going to find a book about that in the library. They might find something on a web page. That's where the good stuff is. So they look, and they like to look at the IBC children's programs. They just like to look at these stuff. Yes.
I can send you what I write about this sterilization because I have made research and write an article on the magazine Greenland.
Yes.
In Danish.
Yes. I look forward to reading with them. All right. Yes, Dr. Dennis.
So all of our curriculum, all the curriculum is legislated, right?
Yes.
Curriculum is legislated. So how do we get legislators? How do we pressure legislators to include Inuit writers in curriculum? Whose job is that?
I guess the same way that you pressured them for all kinds of other things. But a lot of the curricular development is within the university, right? So finally, in my department at McGill, I did have a email a couple of weeks ago saying, oh, maybe we'll talk about Inuit stuff. Because, as she said, as you have so often mentioned to us, so I think it's a matter of going up and saying, hello there, we really got to do this. And it's long and it's tedious. And I've probably been saying it for 20, 30, 40 years, Crazy. But now the Arctic is changing. And so there's pressure from outside, economic pressure, political. They just might do it. Who knows? But it's a matter of getting after them all the time. How did you do it at Memorial?
Well, there was probably a lot of pressure from the Inuit organization.
Yes. Yeah, and it's an amazing, by the way, congratulations on that amazing project that I'm really, really good about. That's
So, I mean, you've obviously done a lot of work with Inuit literature. From your point of view, does it seem that Inuit are going through a transitional period, at least here in Canada, from going from telling stories, orally through, because I mean, yes, I agree, like, I mean, it's only more recently that we have more public book.
Yes.
That's because, I mean, when I was a child, we didn't have a lot of those things, but I'm happy for my son, where in his generation, there are more, we have access to more literature written by Inuit, but I still agree that a lot of them aren't. And I myself go online, to look for these. There's some great bloggers, articles, that aren't necessarily in print form, but they're available online. Would you say that's indicative of Inuit going through from oral, I don't know, having just the oral history to now using different mediums, like,
Personally, I think, but this is my own silly theory, I think that Inuit by and large skipped Canadian Inuit, skipped the whole literary period and went from an oral tradition to film and television production. That's where there's a lot of stuff. I could write you a little theory about it. And that's why you look at the television and film production, it's like forever, and it's so good. And there's very little written, There was all the oral, and then little written, and then all the, And I can come up with lots of theories about the reason for that, but that's how I see it. And I love that. But also, again, the TikTok, there's Novalinga, there's some others that I forget their names, my students know their names, and they're very good, but they are 1 minute little pieces, right? About English culture, about throat singing, whatever.
I'm very curious, would orthography and dialects, do you think have something to do?
But I think, you will learn a lot from Uaka, whom I also have sort of known like forever, right? Uaka. And the Greenland has a different history. I mean, you have to take all of these things into account. I mean, in Greenland, they had the Teachers College was what, 1870?
18,
Or 68?
67. No,
And
47. 1847.
nobody had a teachers' college in Iqaluit but they did, and they were different, and they had a newspaper, a Tuagatliutit, which,
1862. 1861.
yes. So there's lots to learn. They write and write and write over there. Maybe not the young generation, but the younger generation. But Uaka will tell us all about that. And you have textbooks that are based on Greenlandic stuff. I mean, that was one of the things that the McGill teacher training. The books were about apples and oranges and playing golf and all of those things, right? That has changed. Slowly. Slowly.
Do you teach any Greenlandic literature in your course?
No, I should. Because I did some. But I did bring Patsy, a tiny little thing from Greenland where I was last week. As a thank you, because I think it's just absolutely amazing what you're doing. And I hope it pressures all the universities to do something. It's just a little, tiny little thing. So-
Thank you. Thank you. I did say, we've got about 20 minutes until our next presentation, and I think they still need to arrive. I would welcome you at this point. We have copies of your books that you had sent, so if it's okay, if anybody wants to have a look, we've got our publications there. And also, just in advance, we've got Bill Flowers presenting tomorrow, and I have a copy of his book as well, if anybody wanted to have a look in advance of that presentation. Yes, so, yes. Sumiso po ba si Tito? Oh, yes.
I was wondering, do we have a little bit of time?
Yes, we have about 50 minutes, and this is, open discussion.
Maybe I can say some few words about the Greenland University.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Okay,
Yes,
I will try with help from Marianne.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
the University of Greenland called Inuit Circumpolar, no place where you study. Inuit Circumpolar is the one you
yeah, a place where you learn. Yes.
There are about 750 students.
Yeah.
And they are studying in different kind of levels. You can get the bachelor, you can graduate to candidate, you can PhD, what do you call
Yeah,
it?
you can go straight to a master's and PhD. Yeah, so, no, they are accredited.
And you can study with many different kind of there are mange forskellige faggrupper.
There are many different disciplines, like I think you have an Institute of Language and Culture.
I'm teaching in the Institute of Language, Literature and Media. And my students are tredje årsstuderende.
The last year students.
I'm teaching in Greenlandic literature, not about Greenlandic, but literature written by Greenlanders.
So same idea.
Before 1970s. So what did the Greenlandic writers write about Greenland and the society in time with the last 100 years? So my theme is tradition, transformation, and modern. We can pick up a book, read it, and make analysis of what is the purpose or the message of the author. Because the Greenlandic community have changed very much from 1721, when the missionary Hans came to Greenland, where the Inuit was seminar
Just the seminary, the teachers' college.
opened in 1847 to the community changed very much to today. So if you take a book and read it, you can see there is always a fight between the traditions and the modern things in the books. So we don't take and say, this is a good book. No. We take a book and talking about what is the main message of the author. Does he like the traditions? Does he want changes? And does he want European way of living, or does he deny it? I'm talking about he because the most of the Greenlandic authors, writers are men. Until in 1900 and 80s, the women started to write also.
And it's the opposite here. Most of the authors I teach are women.
And it's the reason is the authors of Greenland have been educated at the teachers' college, and it was all women until 1950s. So, and so I think it's I'm educated in Copenhagen University of Copenhagen, in Institute of, we call it the Institute of Eskimology. It was in 70s. Now it had another name. Inuit culture, studies of Inuit culture and language and so on. I have been, I started my studies in 1976, and finished my education in 2016.
You're still learning.
I'm still learning because I take a long break of my studies. And then this autumn, the University of Greenland asked me, can you teach the students about Greenland literature? I was near to say no, because I don't have time. It's only 4 hours a week. Come on. So I do it, and I think it's exciting because I'm also learning and look at books in all over. And the students are very interested. They are not all the 750 students I teach, only 7 of them. Because of my background, I'm ethnographer. Ethnographer.
Oh, you do. Oh, it's
And
not.
anthropologist, some kind of anthropology.
And anthropology. Yeah.
So, I have learned a lot about the tradition of Inuit culture in Greenland and Canada, Alaska, area. So when I'm teaching and my students, I always have, it's important for me to show my students how the life has been before Christianity and after Christianity, and nearly 300 years development in Greenlandic society. So they can see differences between how we're living today and how it was before. Maybe it's so. Yeah, I see.
I would imagine, okay, so you're going through all of these, well, I would say history books, Inuit literature history. I would imagine that your students have to be very objective when they're reading them. Is that ever difficult? Because, they're Inuit and they're reading about Inuit.
My 7 teachers, students, they have another teacher about the oral traditions. They have another teacher to study the
Theoretical framework.
another teacher. And there's also another teacher about the same period, the same time of Greenlandic literature in all the way. So they have four teachers, and there are also other teachers who learning them about Greenlandic literature from 1970 to today. And there are cooperation between Copenhagen University and Elisabeth. Some of the teachers in Copenhagen University, they are using time in Greenland and teaching with Greenlandic literature. So there are a big connection between Copenhagen and
If I may say something about that, because I've been at Upswing, it's amazing what Inuit has become in such a short period of time. I mean, and the level of, like, every year they publish a book about the research done that year. And it's really amazing what comes out of it. And the graduates are all over government and institutions and schools. It's a huge, huge success. But you know that.
yes.
When was the university founded?
In 1980s, I think,
Recent.
80s, we can Google it.
86, 87,
Yeah.
something like that.
You are-
There's
There's a question back here.
Yeah.
Hi, with regard to Kalashisut, it's quite still very healthy from my understanding. And Kalashisut in Greenland is still spoken by a huge number.
Yeah.
Is
I'm
that
teaching-
because of
I'm teaching in
standardization?
Galashish. I'm teaching in Galashish. And we are using Greenlandic books in Greenlandic, in Galashish.
Is it the success of it? Is it because it's a standardized dialect, or what do you attribute to the success of Kalashisut?
We are spoken with Greenlandic language, dialects at the university. But if you come from East Greenland or the polar area, you can also use your language. So it's no problem.
There's one main dialect though for the university?
One main dialect for the university. But we are using Greenlandic, Danish, and English. Yep. Yes, sir.
You can tell them what they did to me last week.
Oh, yeah. Mariana is Doctor of Honor.
Well,
Yes,
honoris
yes,
causa, yes.
Honorable
Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, honorary doctor, I thought it.
Last week. That's why she was in Greenland. It was not because she was celebrating her birthday.
But that too.
And Mariana is the voice of Canada in Greenland radio, because she is telling us everything about what happened in Inuit and the native people here. Radio news nearly every day. So we follow what happened because of her. So she's voice is very known in Greenland. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and makawag ka ni Okwata mo na say our refreshments over there while we wait for our next presenters. I believe that somebody saw the rally corner. I'm gonna put it over there. Languages Division, and they've got two initiatives that they're here to tell us about. One is called Listen, Hear Our Voices, and the other is called We Are Here Sharing Stories. Welcome, everybody, Victoria and Dean.
Really, swagwego, gichicha hawen youngets, ogwali, miwangita loga, wanyataka miwangopumujoga. My name is Victoria Nyeri. I am the youngest child of Margaret and Jim Hill. My dad's family is Oneida, and my mom's parents immigrated to Canada from England in the 1930s. That's a little bit about me. I would like to begin by saying thank you. Kuyanamik, Nakulumik, Yamko, Maxi, Miigwech. And to let you know how grateful we are to be a part of this gathering. Yamko to Patsy, Yamko for the invitation, and to the entire Inuit Circumpolar Council team for bringing us together. Yamko to the artists for sharing the gifts that you have with all of us and with the world. So bring that to, yes, please. So there are three of us visiting from the Indigenous Initiatives Division at Library and Archives Canada. There are five, though, from Library and Archives Canada. Generally, we have a librarian and here as well. And if you get the chance to hear them tomorrow, they'll be making a presentation tomorrow as well. Delia and I will be delivering today's presentation, and we welcome you to the Indigenous Initiatives Division booth over at the college. And Chad Kiknoswick, who is the senior manager for our team. So while our presentation will be focused on the two main initiatives that Delia and I lead through the Indigenous Initiatives Division, I would like to take a few minutes to recognize the current context of reconciliation at Library and Archives Canada. I'll stay on this one. So Library and Archives Canada is made. So therefore, you can see here that the records and the collections held by Library and Archives Canada are central to fulfilling the Government of Canada's objectives and responsibilities related to reconciliation. And a lot of those responsibilities are identified through the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the calls for justice from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and Gender Diverse People, as well as the recently passed United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which was federal legislation passed in 2021. So more specifically, Library and Archives Canada recognizes that it has a role to support First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in accessing information to support their understanding of their histories. Also, to increase awareness of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis histories amongst all Canadians. And this work is guided by these three key elements. The first one is Vision 2030, which is Library and Archives Canada's strategic plan. The second is the Indigenous Heritage Action Plan, and that was developed in 2019, and it identifies 28 concrete actions that Library and Archives Canada, from that point, would carry out over 5 years to recognize Indigenous rights and to support Indigenous rights. The Indigenous Advisory Circle is a group of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have backgrounds in archives, libraries, and other heritage professions, And they come together and they provide guidance for us in the work that we do with the initiatives. And so they're a key part of the work that we do. So this slide is to show that Indigenous initiatives has been funded through two federal budgets. The first one in 2017 and the second one in 2021. That funding allowed Library and Archives Canada to establish the two initiatives that we'll be talking about today. Listen, Hear Our Voices, and We Are Here Sharing Stories. And at that time, that's when the Indigenous Advisory Circle was established as well. So since that time, Library and Archives Canada has been learning and growing in how they approach this work. From Budget 2021, one of the major developments was the establishment of the Indigenous Initiatives Division, that we're the team that Delia and I are part of today. And there was a concerted effort to recruit First Nations, Inuit, and Métis archivists, program managers, and people with specialties in engagement in order for us to be leading this work. So that's kind of a general overview of reconciliation and reconciliation-related work at Library and Archives Canada. I thought you might find interesting. But Listen, Hear Our Voices is my specialty. This is the part of the initiative that I'm responsible for. And when you think about the two initiatives, it's helpful to think of one of them as being internal and one of them being external. And Listen, Hear Our Voices is the one that supports external digitization. So this is a funding opportunity that supports First Nations, Inuit, and Métis governing entities and nonprofit organizations to digitize materials in their own collections. So, sorry. Yep, I'll just highlight the two parts of the purpose. So it's to digitize language and culture materials, as well as to enhance the skills that are probably already in your communities, the knowledge and the resources to digitize materials. The funding supports training, it supports the purchase of equipment, as well as digitization services if materials were to be sent to external companies for digitization. So it's got a broad range of uses. So who can receive funding? So that's Indigenous nations and governing bodies within Canada, Inuit and Métis. Examples, bank councils, a department within a community's administrative structure, governing bodies established through comprehensive claims processes. Examples of not-for-profit organizations are Indigenous representative organizations, cultural centers, historical societies, that kind of thing. Not-for-profit is the key there. The range of funding, so there's the small range is anything under $25,000, and that's available for projects that can be completed within a 12-month time frame. Both of them are kind of put on a 12-month time frame. The one major difference with the small is that it's available for unincorporated nonprofit organizations. So that's less formal historical societies, perhaps. And it's also available to governing entities and incorporated, depending on the need of the project. And the large funding range is anywhere between $25,000 up to $100,000 for that 12-month project. And the limit here is that either the applicant has to be a governing entity or an incorporated not-for-profit organization. So we have another call for proposals coming up this fall, and that will be made through launched through a public announcement. There will be a news release, as well as if you follow Library and Archives Canada on, I think they have Twitter and Facebook. And also, I'm a real person, and my favorite part of the job is like having conversations either by virtual meetings or over the telephone. So call me, email me, and we can set up a meeting. If you're interested, if you know of any organizations that could really use some support, I would be very happy to talk to you, and I'll be at the booth as well. So the next call for proposals is coming up. Once that opens, the application can be downloaded from the Library and Archives Canada website, and there's a section specifically for the Listen, Hear Our Voices funding initiative. And so it's downloaded as a PDF, and submissions are required to be sent by email. I kind of already got into this, but because I'm very excited about it, it's my favorite part, is really the supporting applicants in their interests in finding out eligible activities, and for offering some guidance too. Sometimes archival digitization projects can get very big very quickly. So I often guide applicants to start with a phased approach, to start with some preparatory work, just getting to know what you have, really talking to your community members about what they want to see digitized. So it's that's absolutely an eligible activity, is to really that preparation for digitization as well. And Library and Archives Canada does have one other funding program, which is run on an ongoing basis, and that's called the Documentary Heritage Communities Program. And they also fund similar activities. It's just open to all not-for-profit organizations throughout Canada, so the applicant pool is larger, but that can also be another avenue for support as well. And if you're interested in the review process, we do convene an external review committee for making recommendations to the Librarian and Archivist of Canada. And these are professionals who are First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and they have experience in digitization, program management, and language revitalization programming as well. So we have a few members who have served on the committee more than once, and it's great for consistency, and it's great that they're there to support over the years. But we're always looking for new perspectives, and I would be happy if you had ideas on anybody who would be suitable and interested. I would love to contact them. Yes, so the review committee send their recommendations to the Librarian and Archivist of Canada, and that's where the projects get selected based on the funding envelope. So, but the review committee itself really reviews the projects based on merit, and they're not trying to fit it into a number. It's really about the projects when they're reviewing. And I just wanted to share some of the Inuit projects that have been funded over the past few years. And the funding opportunity was available in 2019, and we will be adding to that list through our public announcement shortly. But yeah, just to give you an idea of organizations who've been doing some excellent work if you're interested in their collections. And next, so I will ask Delia to take over.
just before you go there, can I ask, how, my business, but how would a person know when the call goes for something they would call? Like, is there a mailing list or something that one could get on?
Yes, thank you for asking that. I should have mentioned it. If you email the email address that's in the presentation, it's also available at booth. I will add you to a list, and an email notification can also be sent directly to you and anyone who you think. Yes, we can do that too. Young folks.
Handshake you out. We have a welcome to Coach. Hi, how is everyone? Happy to see you all here today. Delia Shartran, Dish Commercial.
Can you speak up, please?
Delia Shartran, Dish Commercial, and Michigina. Name is Delia Shartran, and I'm the Commission. Winnipeg, Winnipeg, Father Thompson, and those chins.
First time I'm having a hard time hearing
You're
you.
really quiet.
You're very quiet.
Oh, sorry.
The speaker.
Just project.
Okay.
There's a volume on the back speaker.
Oh, there you go. Watch the mic up. There
Yeah,
you just get a check.
Okay,
There.
now we give it a second shot here.
Closer to the microphone.
There you go.
So, Tanshi Kiawao, Nimiya Tamawapumi Takanosh. Hi, how is everyone? I'm happy to see you here today. Delia Shartan Dishna Parshon and Micha Kenya. My name is Delia and I'm a member of the Métis Nation, Winnipeg, Weekend, Magaton, Thompson, Goshen. So I live in Winnipeg, but I'm originally from Thompson, Manitoba, which is a place in northern Manitoba.
Crystal, take care because you are standing just in front of the hotel.
Yes.
So it can like really.
Feedback.
Maybe just feedback.
Talk and see. Just start on.
I'm a project coordinator for We Are Here Sharing Stories, Phase 2, and I'm grateful to be here today to share the project with you. Is that better?
Keep
A
talking.
little better.
Yeah.
Sharing Stories, or WAS as we call it, is phase 2 of a previous access and digitization initiative of the same name. In the previous phase of WAS, the project mandate was to digitize 600,000 images of Indigenous related content from Library and Archives Canada's holdings. That project ran from the fall of 2017 to the spring of 2021. And with the most recent funding LACs received, our current phase of the project has a deliverable to meet of digitizing 450,000 images by August 2024. So most of our team was brought on in the first half of 2022. We're a decentered team of professionals from varying Indigenous cultural backgrounds who work out of the National Capital Region, so Ottawa and Gatineau, as well as the Winnipeg regional offices. And the advantage of this positionality is that the team has been given an opportunity to explore and provide access to not only LEC's main holdings, but collections located in the regional service centers of Vancouver and Winnipeg as well. These are collections which are not always as accessible to the broader Canadian public, but also internally can have limited visibility within the institution. So we have a research framework in order to source materials from a variety of historical, cultural, and geographic backgrounds, but our overall goal is really to prioritize the digitization of material, which consists of indicated records of importance for Indigenous communities themselves. We use a number of tools and resources in order to do this, including we have a master sheet developed by colleagues in the institution of different collections that exist in the archives branch. We also have a list of rare books in Indigenous languages developed in consultation with library professionals in the Polish Heritage Branch. We consult with archival managers and portfolio archivists on new and incoming collections regularly. And we've also tried to utilize the outreach and engagement activities of other sectors, such as reference services, and our own division at events like this one here today to get feedback on the collections we should be digitizing. So generally speaking, the first phase of the project determined access by putting digitized content on LEC's website so that the general Canadian public could search and find images in the collection search. They also used enhanced descriptive work to create both cultural proficiency and increased discoverability in the collection search. So this was their baseline, and generally everything which was digitized in the first round is done with the express purpose of linking the digital image to the record so that it was viewable online. In the second phase of the project, however, we're still working towards these access goals, but we've also expanded on our notions of what access really means to our team in order to encompass additional mechanisms that incorporate a more nuanced approach. So we've placed a greater emphasis on what we call targeted and meaningful access. What this means is that not only are we digitizing materials we can put online, but we're also digitizing materials with restricted access, which we don't intend to put online or make publicly accessible in the same way, but we intend to instead share with specific audiences in order to enhance the impact that those records will have on specific Indigenous communities and organizations. The following mechanisms that are, I need to go back one, that are listed on the slide here, display a variety of additional options for making digitized content accessible that we've explored in this phase of the project. And they include online access and descriptive work, but also access to specific researchers or research projects, institutional partners, our ATIP, access to information privacy branch to review materials, and to our internal regional offices, which brings me to the next slide. So examples of appropriate access. It's true that not everything we digitize is going to end up online, but it will get shared in some way, shape, or form. And these are just some of the examples of access we've provided to records this year. So we digitized 44,000 images of residential school-related documents from the school file series that were missed in the initial TRC document collection. And then we had them transferred to the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. We sent 18,000 images from health-related records to the Indian Residential School History and Dialogue Center at UBC for a project they're developing on hospitals in relation to residential schools. We sent 1,400 images from the Réveillon Prayer Phone, which we digitized and sent to the Habitat Cultural Institute in Northern Quebec for their 100-year anniversary of Nunavut of the North. And so far, we've digitized 1,200 images from the Inuit Land Use and Occupancy Project, or ILUOC, where access is then determined by ITK. So with ILUOC, the maps we digitize, we have them digitized and then LAC holds them, but if someone wants to request access to them, they have to first gain permission from ITK before LAC will provide a copy. So the idea being that access to these important records should be community-centered, and with the traditional knowledge they hold, they should not be readily available to the general public or online by any means. Next. So when we're deciding how a record should be made accessible, we look at things like if the material in question is graphic or sensitive in nature, and we ask ourselves questions like, could it be a potential trigger for audiences? But also we ask, is it culturally sensitive, or does it constitute knowledge or imagery of the sacred or ceremonial that shouldn't be shared with the Canadian public as a whole? So records pertaining to this type of material can include an array of content, for example, images of burial grounds, invasive medical photos, personal information, and accounts of ceremonies. Depending on the content, we as a team are learning to navigate discussions on figuring out what's the best way to then handle these records. I would say that because we come from diverse Indigenous communities and cultural backgrounds with our own cultural teachings, the team often have unique insights and opinions and are more aware of the sensitivities regarding some of these records that might be missed by others. So to that end, our last year of the project, which we're in now, we've created a working group which will look at developing procedures for the institution on how to manage culturally sensitive records when they are encountered. This need to define such a process was really born from the many records that we've indicated so far as a team in the collection since beginning the project, and then realizing that currently there really is no standardized approach in the institution yet on how to handle them or what to do. So we thought we can do something about this as a team, and this is something we really want to get done in our last year of the project. Records like these can be found in archival holdings in many cases because of how institutions inherited their collections in the past, gathering ethnographical documents created by anthropologists, ethnographers, linguists, and other researchers. And many of these collections contain valuable records from communities. One example is the Archibald Lane Fleming phone. So while Fleming was a missionary from 1915 at Kimaru, which is formerly known as Lake Harbor, Baffin and Nunavut, he kept 2 notebooks and assorted pages describing the religion and customs of. The textual materials were donated to Library and Archives Canada by the widow of Fleming. Shaman songs, stories, and legends in both Norman orthography and Slavic. Specific communities to have access to because of the stories in them, but the collection itself is problematic. We know, for one, the shaman material is culturally sensitive in nature, and we know it should only be accessed by specific communities. The songs were collected in a questionable manner when we consider consent, and it's not clear that Fleming had any type of permission to record. There's also ongoing barriers to access because the archive reflect the attitudes and biases of the collector who missionary work banned traditional practices and Inuit beliefs while promoting Christianity. At the same time, ownership of the material should rest with the community, institution, which is not the case. So this example gives us a lot of solutions that address these issues. For example, we're looking at how we develop policies based on cultural sensitivity, such as access restrictions for specific communities, shared ownership and repatriation, and what these potentially look like at our institution. We're also looking at how we can engage in appropriate consultation for determining respectful use of information, comparative description, and how this practice can provide context back to the record. So as I mentioned, our project also engages in reparative descriptive work in order to fix the way records have historically been described. Often with archives pertaining to Indigenous people, we find that there's a number of issues, including, but not limited to, large gaps in information, people, places, and even activities in the records being incorrectly identified or not identified at all, and the use of outdated or offensive terminology. So our team works to update the records to more accurately and respectfully reflect the content by adding to the descriptions and also changing them. So here we have an example of reparative descriptive work. This is a photograph from the collection Rosemary Gilead Eaton Phone. This series consists of photographs and a diary by Rosemary documenting her trips to the Arctic region of Canada in 1953, 55, and 1960. In particular, this photo was taken during a trip to Iqaluit in approximately 1956. The photograph was identified, digitized, and described by the We Are Here Sharing Stories project. The original description lacked essential information, which would provide points of access for those who were searching for it online for specific details like the community name. So the project added a new description, including the geographic name, both present and historical, a description of cultural activities in the photo, and a date range. After putting it online, the image was shared through project naming, and this led to the man in the photo being identified via Facebook, which was then also added to the record's description. So by using this example, we can see how reparative descriptive work can recontextualize documents from Indigenous perspectives and tell stories that are not part of the dominant historical narrative by creating culturally sensitive archival descriptions. This work is challenging, but it's essential for reconciliation. And in order to correct historical inaccuracies and add missing information, the knowledge and expertise of Indigenous staff and community engagement is essential. So I included this chart just to give an idea of the scope and scale of content that We Are Here Sharing Stories project has digitized, but also the various types of mediums we work with. So the project was started since the project was started in 2017, and between the two teams, it's digitized over 1 million images to date. And the types of materials include maps, textual documents, newspapers, photos, rare books, artwork, published government reports, microfilm, and microfiche. And this is just a breakdown of the number of images between the two teams. And then here's some examples of digitized content. On the left, we have an example of a publication from the Inuit Women's Association of Canada's newsletters and their issue on childcare in both English and Inuktitut. In the middle is an example of a photographic collection from the Charles Gimple phone of Carver. And on the right, we have an example of a textual document on Leech Lake Hurons. And so here we have examples of our digitized rare books collection. In phase 1, they digitized approximately 50 books. This phase, we've digitized and uploaded 56 titles to the library catalog, and we're going to continue adding more throughout this following year. So we have over 25 languages and dialects represented within this collection of books, including Inuktitut. And while we recognize as a team that a lot of these materials were created and initially distributed as tools of colonization by residential schools, churches, as well as the Canadian government, our hope in digitizing them is that we provide access to them as language tools and kind of give them a second life as that. This is our current webpage for the project, and it can be found on the addresses that are listed in the research guides we're providing at our booth over at the college. It includes a table of the materials digitized in the previous phase with links to the content, as well as a map with pinned geotags of the communities represented in the collection. The map is also color-coded to reflect whether the collections contain First Nations, Inuit, or Métis Nation content, and it'll be updated with more collections digitized by our team in the following year as our project comes to an end. However, in the meantime, what we've done is we've provided a list of collections and their names on the research guide handout at the booth to give an idea of what can currently be viewed online, what will be available shortly, and what keywords and collection titles to search in the collection search on Library and Archives Canada's main website. So if you have any questions on how to use the tools, though, please stop by our booth and take a research guide and follow up and ask us questions. So we'll be happy to help. And that brings us to our discussion and questions portion.
Questions from anyone?
Listen to our voices.
Yeah, I'll put it up for everyone.
We were talking in the airport a little bit about AI and scraping of information on the internet, images. Do you have any? You have images on the internet that are available, right? So, do you know if any? I guess it's impossible to tell if the images have been scraped by the AI.
I'm not sure about AI, but I do know that the images that we put online through our project are ones that we don't have concerns about access permissions or them being replicated. We put them online mainly just to share the information. So when we have ones where we do have concerns about, say it's under copyright or there's access to information and privacy concerns or things like that, we don't put them online because we don't want them to be scrubbed. But I couldn't speak to like the larger LAC database itself.
And then what I heard you say also in the airport is that you're only putting up images that are past 70 years. So
It's 50 years actually.
No, it's
They just changed it, it was 50, it's now
Oh, okay.
70.
So someone like me from Alaska could go to your database and take one of those images and mutate it for my own art purposes?
If it's online, you could, but I think that if there are copyright concerns, then it would be like listed on the record to make sure that you do your due diligence in receiving copyright from who holds copyright. But with our project, we don't put anything that's got copyright concerns online to be taken in just for other purposes. Sorry, Brooke?
No, I'll just add really quick. If it's online, you can do what you want with it. If there is copyright concerns, it won't be online because we don't have the copyright to put it up. And if you have any questions about photos that you've seen in the collections, or you come and see, material, we do have a copyright office who deals with the copyright, so they can put you in contact with the person that you need to discuss with for the permissions to use their material.
Dennis?
How did you get permission from so many different sources to present on your site? I'm just curious. That's a lot of information, there's a lot of images and a lot of
It
a lot
is a
of
significant
material.
number of images,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But like I said, not all of the images that we've digitized so far are ending up on our website.
Oh,
They're either ending up getting shared with specific partners or for specific research purposes. But a significant number of them too also come from the government archive side.
okay.
So they're old historical documents that were created by the government. So, and in those cases, we're not concerned about copyright or
So anyone can go there and use that material in their research then?
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, that's the idea, is to really
Okay.
create access to historical documents that can be used by researchers or educators or things like that.
Hi, I live here in Nunavut, so I don't think of digitization as access because the internet doesn't work very well here. So I'm wondering what the alternatives are that Library and Archives Canada offers for someone in Nunavut who wants access, but the internet isn't access.
So there's a number of ways that you can still access by contacting Library and Archives directly. Well, I guess, did you want to take this one?
Yeah, so this is what we do in reference is figure out the best way to get you access. So if you can't make it online or see anything, you can come down to Ottawa. Obviously, that's not really a great option for a lot of people. So what we can do oftentimes is there's like photos that you see or like descriptions. Again, a lot of it's online.
Where would you see a photo? Like, what would you know?
No. So if you can access our collection search site, it's just like our online database, essentially. That's where we keep all of the archival descriptions. A lot of it doesn't have photos or any records, digital objects attached, but we can send you copies of those photos. We would just work with you to try to figure out what the best way that is. We can mail them, we can, if email is better, I know that obviously it's not always functional to do it online.
Some people still use fax machines.
Yeah, we
So-
definitely fax, we can fax.
Okay.
So it would just be a matter of finding, trying to figure out what you're looking for and whether or not we have that in the collection and then the best way to get the information you're looking for.
So does Library and Archives Canada do any meaningful content outreach? Because libraries and archives are part of Inuit culture, right? So to just imagine someone knows to ask about something without being able to use webs, like it comes out of thin air that you hope someone in Nunavut will come to say, I'd like to use this resource. This is exactly what I was looking for. Like, I don't see it, how that's happening.
I think through events like this is really the beginning of us trying to do that meaningful content outreach. So part of our division and why it was created in the last couple of years with the funding that we received was really to start the process of being able to meaningfully engage with communities. And that's part of why we're here giving these presentations. And we've done several other ones kind of throughout the year at different events and stuff. So we are trying, we're trying to engage more with communities, but we're also kind of at the beginning stages of it ourselves.
And I imagine through the projects you fund, like Abacus Cultural Institute, Different Heritage Society, promotion would be done that way through there as well. Would that happen? For the work that you do?
For Listen Hear Our Voices, we don't dictate how or what they do with the digitized content that they create as part of their projects. That's something that often people build databases as part of their projects or put materials on their own websites that they have. So when Library and Archives Canada lists the recipients, that's kind of one way of people finding out who's doing projects and then searching out what they may have put online. But so far, it's that kind of
Very specifically.
yeah.
Can I answer your question? ICC Canada is about to launch ICC's archives, and we are creating materials specifically for all Inuit communities in the north. So give us another 6 to 8 weeks, and hopefully they'll be tools. So right now we're working on a video which we'll send out on USB keys as well as online about what is an archive and how do you use one. And it'll be in Inuit as well as English. We're also working on translating. So we talked a lot about archival descriptions, which are basically just like a library catalog entry for archival records. We're making a video. We're making actually a digital story, translating one of those formal archival records into a story that anyone, all ages, can understand. So we're doing it obviously from the perspective of ICC, ICC Canada's collection, but obviously it's transferable to any archival collection. Generally, there's a few things that ICC archives are doing because we are an Inuit archive and not a government archive that are very specific to us, but hopefully our sort of how-to and introduction to archives will help navigating other big, sort of documentary heritage collections like LAC and Avatak as well. Avatak has a wonderful, though Nunavut, but Avatak has a very good database as well.
Just talking about online access, have you considered having a low bandwidth site? Because it sounds like you've done a lot of work with proper naming and labeling as descriptively and well as you can. So if you have an excellent sort of searchable website, even if you're not able to see the images, if you're looking, say, for a family member and you're in a community with poor internet, like Inuit Art Foundation has a low bandwidth website option button, so you can load the stories, but the images won't show up, so that it actually is accessible to people. They may necessarily, but you can request images be sent to you and stuff like that. So that's a possibility because it sounds like you've already done a lot of great work for like image searching and descriptions. So that's something to look into.
Thank you. ICC archives, low bandwidth version, coming in 2024 too.
I really appreciate that suggestion, and I think it connects with the question and the statement that not considering digitization as access. Definitely our ears are open and our minds are open to receiving suggestions like that. We don't always know we don't always have the same experience, and we don't always know what tools we might be able to utilize. So, yeah, come at us with the good ideas.
I'm Nali from Pennsylvania. I have a question. Since I have ancestors all through Cape Dorset, George River, and Injua, Cape, since I'm visually impaired, what photo is that from 1915? That's what it was. Do you know the name or who? By whom?
It was a photo. I was.
On one of the slides?
Yeah, it just says, I think, a girl from George River.
You won't have name or by whom?
This one? Great Whale River, Quebec?
Oh, Great Whale. That's put on up.
But still,
Is she named?
Yeah. It just says,
it doesn't say, it has no name or by whom, missionaries, I believe.
It's Olaf Johann Murray Bond.
So,
So from their records?
yeah, so we actually developed a research guide, that lists a lot of the Inuit, collections and their collection names that we have at our booth. Which will give you more information on the actual collection that it comes from. I don't have right now.
I grabbed one.
Okay, this one? Oh, yep. Unfortunately, it is only in English.
So, for example, if a small nonprofit in a little community applies and receives a grant and they digitize, for example, someone's individual photo collection, and they bring it and they give it to you, and then you put it on your website. Is that how it works? If someone wants to.
For the Listen to Our Voices funding, Library and Archives Canada does not receive any of the materials, whether they're in the original format or the digitized format. So those are for you.
So I see.
Yeah.
For some reason I thought
Yeah. But,
you were the end user.
oh, no.
Okay. But you put, you put on your website,
What
you do that?
Sorry. So we publish the name of the organization that received funding,
Okay.
the amount they were funded, their province, territory, location, and their project title, the name that they've given their project. So that's the information that's available on the website about the funding recipients.
And is there any link to the actual product?
No.
None? Okay.
No, but that's a good question, and
Yeah.
that would be something that we would have to agree on and have permission from the recipient to share.
Oh, yeah.
Not a question for me, but more of a comment. I really commend Library and Archives for creating your division. I think it's very important. And I'm especially appreciative of, well, obviously the work that you do. I mean, I feel a little bit more looked out for in a way, I guess I could say, knowing that there is the Indigenous Initiatives Division at Library and Archives. And I really hope that other federal governments and departments follow suit and, create such things. I think it's very important. Inuit, First Nations, and Métis have always been here. We need to have our voices heard. We need to be a part, and we need to have, proper representation. And I really appreciate the sensitivity, because like I said, I feel like there's somebody down there who's kind of got our back, so thank you.
Do you want to take a few minutes before the next presentation? There's coffee and goodies there. If you want to
Yeah.
take it.
Can you
Have a
stretch?
stretch.
Stretch your
We'll
legs,
get everything here.
While we're waiting too, I'm just going to have a slideshow of my work, because I'm not organized in a PowerPoint presentation form. I'm a performer. So I'm just putting a slide in, like my
my password.
I think it's like a shared issue, but I always have to bring it up every single We're very proud of her here in Nunavut as well, but hailing from Nunavik, the multi-talented Sylvia Cloutier. She's here to talk about using Georgia colonization.
Let's see where this mic will go. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, it's good to be here. I'm here in Iqaluit in my other hometown, it feels like. Sylvia Cloutier Nguyunga, Kujua Mutayabunga. I am Sylvia Cloutier, originally from Kujua, Nunavik, and I lived here in Iqaluit for 23 years. And am I blocking? I just put photos there because I'm not a, I wanted to share a little bit visuals of my world, I guess, where I come from and the work that I've done. Because I probably won't be able to get into everything that I want. So Iqaluit was very much a home to me. Kujak is where my friend Sylvia, my mother's daughter. And then as I branched out into the world, I started to travel. And then I was Daisy Watt's Amuda, Daisy Watt's granddaughter. And then as I branched out again into the world, I was always referred to Sheila's daughter. People call me Sheila, and I say, yeah, because I'm so used to it. And now I'm Mr.'s mom. And the reason why I share this with you is not just to say where I come from, but I come from a line of storytellers. My history on my mother's side in my family, we are storytellers. My grandmother shifted my career in a different place. I went to Avatar to look for story, to inspire me to write and to create theater. And when I went to the Avatar Inuit Cultural Institute, where I was a summer student when I was a teenager, and I was photocopying Thomas Egelmuck's dictionary notes. That was my summer job. And I came there as an adult in my 40s looking for stories. And I noticed in the database there was a lot of photos of my grandmother and notes. And then I came across this name, Pisawatia, which is my grandmother's grandfather. He was my great-great-grandfather. And the woman that was working there, she said, oh yeah, hold on a second. She went into the other room and she came back with a book. And on the book cover, it's a story, it was a book that Bernard Saladin d'Anglure, anthropologist, wrote about society in Gaïsio and history. And there was a picture of Pisawatia, my great-great-grandfather. So I was shocked because I didn't even know cameras were around those days. And his father. And so I was really surprised. I thought, wow, like, I can't believe this kind of reveals itself to me in this way. And when I opened the book and I looked into the credits, it said that he was indeed the late Miss Daisy Watt's grandfather, and that he was a shaman, Angakko. And I thought, what? My grandmother never told us. And I started to think, and the reason why I tell you the story is my grandmother shared a lot of stories. In fact, when I asked Avatak for stories, they gave me a stack, I'm not kidding, this big of CDs of all the interviews she had done in the past about all kinds of topics and issues. But what I was trying to explore was stories, like our old Inuit stories, because I've always been fascinated with old stories. And it probably comes from the fact that when I was between 8 and 18 years old, my family moved to Montreal, and I felt very away and removed from my Inuit culture. So I became very hungry to learn. And my grandmother was my resource. So we would go home 3 times a year and I would ask my grandma, curious and very expressive kid, and about Kisawatiap through my grandmother. She said that he was the main hunter in the family at the camp, and he had taught the younger men how to hunt. And one day, he lost the use of his legs. He became paralyzed. The Hatunat were coming in for the first time. And so what he did was he was always carving his own tools, and he was introduced to carving, and he took his carvings in exchange for bullets to give to the men, the young men in the family. So I always loved his story because he was so generous and creative, you know, and caring. That was my image of him based on what my grandmother said. And I said, how come he got paralyzed? How come his legs didn't work? Because he walked his legs off. What do you mean? He walked his legs off. That's all. And she would just say that. And I kept thinking, how did he walk his legs off? I was a kid and I was, even as a, wondering how he walked his legs off. So I imagined that he walked so much in life, hunting and working, that maybe he wore his legs off and they didn't work anymore, right? So he was resourceful and resilient enough to take on carving because it was based on his skills as a hunter. And this modern world was emerging. And so he made carvings. We never made carvings to put on a shelf, and as Inuit in the old days, we didn't even have a shelf, but we carved our tools. So he exchanged them for bullets, and then that's how life went on. And I was so inspired by his story because now I'm learning that he was a shaman. When we grew up with a pretty religious grandmother, and in those days, the belief systems changed, right? So Inuit, what I was learning about shamanism, and I'm not an expert in shamanism, but I became curious from what I was learning and finding, because she died without ever telling us this, that her grandfather was a shaman. And in those days, a belief system was imposed, and there was a fear imposed. And so I even remember her when I was a young adult and I was throat singing. She found out I was throat singing and she said, "What is she doing?" It really affected her. It scared her. It got her actually upset. And my mother never told me this until later. And only like 2 years later, when she heard me first sing, she was really upset about it. And I thought, well, let her. She's allowed to be upset. She's been told to live a certain way. Forget about the traditional beliefs, or forget about the beliefs and the songs and the stories that she grew up with or that were alive for so long and had to live this way. So if it affects her, let her. And I'm very grateful that I, at a young age in adulthood, that I had the awareness. I don't know where it came from, but I had this awareness that she's allowed to feel the way she feels. And she's allowed to react the way she wants to. She needs to react. But I'm also allowed to feel the way I feel. And I was just this young adult who was really proud to be Inuit. And so I went on a journey of learning about myself as an adult. And I realized that I'm an artist. I'm a creative person. Like, creativity is not just a tool for me, it's my toolbox, right? And all these little things that I learn in life, you know, my creativity comes with me. It's a part of who I am. And so as a young adult, I really wanted to learn about drum dancing, kataja, Inuktitut songs, because I lost my Inuktitut when I was young, growing up in Montreal. So I wanted to learn as much as possible, and learning Inuktitut songs motivated me to learn Inuktitut, to pronounce better. And in fact, when I was 21, I took an Inuktitut course. Kublu and Papatsi were my Inuktitut teachers with Mukbala. I was pregnant with my first son then. And I was on a journey to learn about my Inukness, learn about my family history, and also I didn't realize that I was actually a young Inuk reclaiming our culture, because I wasn't hearing the katatja. I wasn't seeing young people singing that much. I wasn't until like Paututik had this fashion show and we all like fed off of each other and started to learn songs and dances, and it just opened things up. And I understood that when I learn a song, it's not my song. I have to be part of the learning cycle. So I became involved with working with youth and teaching youth teaching youth the songs that I had learned. And I continue to do that. And each song has a story. And each dance has a story. Because Inuit come from Greenland, Canada, Alaska, Russia. There's so many stories. And being an artist, I was so lucky to be able to visit Inuit Nunangai and visit and work with artists from the circumpolar world. And we are always inspired when we work together. So story is something that I've always been fascinated with. And what I've been inspired by is Inuit stories, Inuit culture, but also our resilience. Because I think that story has a spirit of itself. Story is something that surfaces. Like I found out that my great-great-grandfather was a shaman. The truth revealed itself. Even though it didn't have to, it could have been buried. But I believe that that's what happens in life. And so I'm a cultural performer. I have like maybe the longest resume because every week I have a different job and every month is a different life. And it's a life that I've chosen for myself. I was never attracted to being in a job where I had a big salary and put my retirement money away, and maybe I should have, but I felt like I had to stick with this path. And I don't know how many times I wanted to give up. It was probably the reasonable thing to do, to give up at some times, especially being a mother twice, and the cost of living in the north, being a homeowner. I mean, there's many reasons why I shouldn't have been an artist this long, but there's many more reasons why I believe I was meant to be on this path, and I still believe that. And I'm happy because now my oldest son is an artist as well, and I really believe that art heals. Art is a way of life. Art is all around us, you know. Somebody designed this logo. Somebody designed the clothing that you're wearing, the shoes that you're wearing, the car that you drive, you know, the sign outside. There's an artist that is involved with this light. Art is everywhere. And so I think it's also very important to value the artists in our communities. The reason why I bring this up is because we have these skills as Inuit that are ingrained in us as storytellers, as hunters, as caregivers, as people who look for truth and justice in a community way, in a community-centered way. And I can't help but think at this point in my career as an artist, and I'm gonna ask you this question because I would love for you to think about it too. What would society look like if Inuit designed society? I'm just gonna put it out there. I'll come back to it. So, as a young adult, in my 20s and in my 30s, I did a lot of cultural performances. I taught at NS, Nunavut Sivniksavut, for 10 years. And I started recently teaching at Nunavik Sivniksavut in Montreal. I've worked running a circus program. That was my only government job. Circus program and government. So I did that for a little while in Kuja. But I was always pulled to work with youth or work in the arts. And in 2018, after living here for 23 years, my little boy was diagnosed with autism. And he was about to start school. And he didn't have any support or education here. So I made the really difficult decision to leave Iqaluit, to leave the north, and to move to Montreal so that he could have an education. But I was trying to figure out how to do this. And then something popped up on my computer. Indigenous residency at the National Theatre School. That's my ticket. So I ended up going, I was accepted, and I ended up going to school at the same time as my 5-year-old, at 42 years old. I thought, okay, I can use all my life experiences, all my work experiences, and see where it can take me. And so at this point, as an artist, not just performing, but I invested a lot of time here in Iqaluit working with Tunap Time, with Adia Night Festival. If there was a mining symposium, I would take care of their opening and closing ceremonies. I was always working on shows, all different kinds of shows. And one of the greatest shows that I had worked on at that point was called Tuluwa. Sometimes you see photos of us that look like ravens. And so that was a really beautiful collaboration that we did with artists from Greenland, Nunavik and Nunavut. It started with Adia Night Festival, and then it evolved into the National Arts Center Northern Scene Festival, and they invested a lot in us, and they sent us to Banff, and we came together and trying to figure out how can we do a show about Tuluwa, because it was the theme of the festival at the time. And as artists, we can do a show on anything. We could do a show on toilet paper if we're told to. You could come up with anything, and the challenge is kind of fun, right? So I thought, okay, Tuluwa, cool. We see them all the time. And but what are their stories? And Inuit stories about Tuluwa there's so many in common. Greenland, Canada, but there's this version that goes, where the Tuluwa goes, that he's the creator of the world. And then, he's the trickster. He's the flirt, or she's the flirt. He's the boss. Like, there's all these stories about Tuluwa. So we all came together, and because of our stories are so oral, like we never had a writing system before, so we all took turns sharing our stories about Tuluwa. And then we tried to see, and the cast that I had recruited were circus performers, singers, rock stars, actors, throat singers, seamstresses, just a mix of beautiful, incredible, open-minded and open-hearted artists. And we all created this show in 2 days to perform for the festival. And then we went to Banff and Ottawa. But it was a beautiful collaboration, really allowing every artist to shine in their own way and create original music and also to revive old songs. And it had circus and dance and theater, and it was just this beautiful soup that was really, really moving. And so when I moved to Montreal, I left the north and I went to school, and the school said, your education is really based on what you want to learn here at the school. You can take courses from every department if you want. You can work with the actors, you can work with the directors, you can work with the playwrights, with the production team. So I was like, whoa, that's a lot, because we never had that up here, right? So I thought, I really want to learn how to design lights. That was my curiosity. And I also want to see how I can take my art to another place. And the biggest takeaway that I had at school in my 2.5 years there was I learned how much I love writing. I was always doing some writing and creating and writing, but the challenge of writing a play, it was almost like, okay, you're gonna ride a bike across the country. Yeah, I know how to ride a bike, but I don't know if I know how to ride a bike across the country. It was really challenging to me, but my class, all my playwriting classes, I felt like all the students were people I could really connect with. Like they thought the same kind of way I did. They saw the world in similar ways. Like everything is a story, you know? And so because I was so inspired by the story of my great-great-grandfather, I decided to write a piece, and I called it Saima, about a boy in search for answers in life. I gave myself permission to write a story based on all these little old stories that I learned from our Inuit culture over the years. And I wanted this boy to journey through these worlds and meet the characters that we learned stories from when we were kids. Because there was always a message in our stories. The Akami, Kalupilo, Nuliayuk, Sedna, she has different, Sisuma Akna, she has many names. But I wanted this boy to journey through these worlds. So he journeyed through the ice, to the bottom of the sea, to on the ice, to the sky. He journeyed through all these different worlds to look for answers of where his father could be, who went missing. Because his mother said he walked and he walked and he walked his legs off. I was just, and at the very, I'm not going to tell you the whole story because maybe one day it could be in production and then you could experience it. I want to say something. I was writing this play and I was at the very end of it. And I knew I had to end it, but I didn't know how to end it. Because sometimes Inuit stories don't even have an ending. And I love that. We have our own way of telling a story. So I was inspired by the old, but now I'm using writing, which is a new way. And I'm doing it on a first stage, so it's a different structure. But I wanted it to be very visual, but also allow your imagination to wander. And so I'm sitting at my table, and he was about 6 years old, is eating his dessert across from me. And I said, Emila, there's a man, and he's walking on the ice, and he's walking, and he's walking, and he's walking. Then what happens? Then there's a whale that goes under the ice, and then it goes, and the tail comes and breaks the ice, and the guy goes jumping in the air, and he flips, and he lands, he turns into a nano. That's perfect. So that was my ending of the play Saima. And I thought, wow, like, truth is revealing itself. You know, I'm sure this was a story in the past, and it just came through. He's also named after my grandmother. I don't know if she had anything to do with it, but he has her bossy spirit. And so that was my first play that I wrote, a play. I've created shows many times, but this was the first time I sat down to write a play. And I used my inspiration. I used inspiration from my family history, from the old stories, and I wrote it in English, and I really hope we can adapt it in Inuktitut, Kalatlisut, Inuktitut one day. And I think this would be a beautiful play for young audiences, but also to allow us adults to feel like a kid again. So that was Saima. And I'm still in school. After my first year, I wrote Saima. And then in my second year, my supervisor said, you keep talking about how when you go to Kujwa, there's a theater there, but there's no theater. In Kujwa, we have a beautiful theater, but there's no theater activity, ever. And in Iqaluit, there's theater activity, but there's no theater. And I have 1 foot in Nunavik and 1 foot in Nunavut, and it's like, sometimes I wish I can combine our communities. So, and the thing that was also happening while I was at school was something that we sadly, as Inuit, deal with. Suicides in my family, suicides in my communities. And it was really hard to be in Montreal and to hear about losing someone, especially when it hits home in your family. And there's this feeling of, like you feel helpless, like you can't do anything about it. And it's almost this feeling of, I don't want to tell you how to feel, but this is how I was feeling. Like you almost have to normalize it, but you don't want to normalize it because it's not normal. And when my supervisor was hearing me talk about this, he said, have you ever thought about maybe creating a piece about it? And I was like, oh no, I don't want to do anything controversial. I love our stories that take us places, and you know, I like the idea of having mythical stories, or like, you know, stories that allow us to escape. But then it was bothering me. It was bothering me that my cousins would lose another child, that my cousins would lose another child, that my friend's son died, that my kid's friend died. Like, it was bothering me. It was making me feel heavier and heavier. So something in me told me, just try. Try to explore something. And it took me a while to get started. I was paired with a mentor, and she's a puppetry master, puppetry artist. I'm not talking about like Muppets, but visual puppetries, like something very visual. And I love visual and I love design. So we were paired up together, and I decided to, when I was ready, I decided to explore a piece about how a community is affected by the loss of somebody to suicide. And I didn't use anyone specifically, but with all the experiences that I went through, and also talking with my family members who lost their children and also my friends who lost their children, I decided to start going there. And I knew it was going to be very uncomfortable and it was going to be something that I had to take my time with. So it started off with me playing these different characters because I wanted to challenge myself as a performer this time. Actually, it was part of my education. Sylvia, you like to do everything? Well, now you're going to do everything in this one. Okay. So, because in the North, there's no theater. It's not like I could write something and say, hey, can you help me produce this? Can you help me build this? Can you help me do? We didn't have that. So I just got used to doing kind of a little bit of everything, you know? And here I am in school and there's like resources and all that, but I was told, try to challenge yourself. So I wrote it, I performed it, I wrote the music, I created the dialogue, I envisioned the design of it. Like I pushed myself. And I played a mother, a hunter, a grandmother, child, and I used my grandmother's recordings. And I used my voice. And I danced. So I did a little bit of everything, but I realized when I was doing all that, it was me. It was very much an expression of how I express myself as an artist. And I feel like our young people maybe needed those tools to express themselves too. And I can't save the world and I can't bring about this big change. I mean, if we could, we would, right? If we could stop suicide, we would. But I could do a little part in my own way as an artist. And also, I realized moving to Montreal that the world had no idea of the realities in the North. Nothing. And so I started to look at statistics too. And there's a scene in the play where I am playing a grandmother and my kids and grandkids are in the house and they're very loud because they're running around and it's a very small, crowded house. And I'm just so happy that all these people came. You know, those ones that call you to tell you to pay your bill? Or Revenue Canada that tells you you're late on paying your taxes, but they still don't know where you are, you know? And all these people that are in their cubicles and they make their decisions based on like how much the food is gonna cost up here, but they don't come up and see for themselves. You know, they all showed up on an airplane and they showed up at my doorstep. And I was so happy to see them and I thanked them for coming. And I took some time to talk to them. And that was the character that I played at the time. And I submitted this scene as part of my application to come in here. And one of the things that I say, as in my character, I say, last year, in 1 year, in my region of Nunavut, we lost 11 people to suicide. 9 were from one community, including an 11-year-old. The suicide rate is so high in the North, where I come from. It's like the equivalent of 17,000 people dying in 1 year in Montreal. What would your government do if this was happening where you come from? What would your mayor do? What would your prime minister do, who also comes from here? What would he do? I was definitely speaking to the bureaucrats, and I'm definitely speaking to the people who don't realize what our realities are. So this was kind of like the dark side, but sometimes we just need to understand our history and where we are right now in order to heal. The story was also about life. There was a hunter who was walking on the ice, hunting in the moonlight, in the dark. To me, that's where we come from. That's our resilience. That's our strength. And so I wanted that to come through. There was a child who saw the Asami and was whistling and dancing and running and chasing them. There was a mother who got pregnant and had her baby and sang her lullaby and was deciding to be very honest with the baby. Please live. Down south, our children want our kids to go to university. They want us to go to a good school. They want them to have a good partner in life and get married and like have a good job and make good money. And sometimes we just want our kids to stay alive. This is a reality for us. And so that song kind of came from there. But she loves her child, but she's not sure. You know what I mean? That like we struggle, right? And I just wanted to be honest about the different aspects that we experience here. And also break the stereotypes. We are not meant to be victims. And there's a saying that our ancestors didn't work that hard to see us fail. They worked so hard to survive so that we can be here. So it's important to honor them. And we're named after them. They're inside our blood. Their blood is in our blood. We can't escape that. So we have to remember that our blood is strong. So Hush, I called it Hush, it's a working title. And I also created it in Inuit, French, and English to reach out to that. I was in Montreal, so I was thinking Montreal. I was thinking I wanted the mayor there, François Legault there, I wanted Justin Trudeau there, I wanted them to be in the front. Because I wanted our leaders who make decisions for us to be there. And to wonder, what if this happens to my kids? What if this happens in my community? So Hush was very much a healing project for me, and it's still ongoing. I've been lucky to have a residency at Playwrights Workshop Montreal. I'm grateful that there's these kind of opportunities for writers in Montreal. I really hope that there could be more of these kind of opportunities here up north. It would be so great if we can have a space in Nunavut, Labrador, in NWT, in Greenland, a place where we can go and just write for 2 weeks with all the inspiration there, you know? That's something that I aspire to a lot. And then the next phase of my work now is a piece called, it's always a working title. I'm okay about creating something and then like letting it go and then like having it come back later or redefining it or going in a different direction and going again in a different, I'm okay with that. So this one is, I have another residency in Montreal with another theater company. And it is to answer that question. What if Inuit designed our society today? I can't help but think how we have to be very assertive right now for what we need and what our rights are. And we have to be very strong that way. And we have to make it very clear to our government, to people who make decisions with us or for us, that this is what we need. And I always wonder what it would be like if we were fully in control of that. And if we really had the respect from our Canadian government, the Danish government, from the southern world, if we had full respect, and if the world saw us Inuit as people who can really make a contribution and they can really learn a lot from us, what would the world look like today? What would a hospital look like? Would it be called a hospital? What would the schools look like? Would it be called a school? Would it be called a place of learning? Would the daycare and the elder center be together? I think about these things, and I want to create a piece based on how we see us designing our own society, based on the skills that we have, like Risavatsia, who made carvings to exchange for bullets because that was his skill as a hunter. And the women who make incredible clothing to survive so that we can stay warm in the winter. Well, look at all the fashion that's happening right now. The hunter who started a business outfitting because he's very good at what he does and he wants to do this for his life. He wants to support his children based on his skills. And I want to see the world happen this way. And what I love about art is that we can create the world that we want to see. We can because we are creating it on paper. And even if it doesn't exist outside I'm going to call it, I'm quoting reality. But even though if it doesn't exist or doesn't exist yet, art always influences change and always influences the people that want to hear it. I'm going to pick up on something that you mentioned. When I'm in Montreal, and I really do believe that people want to learn more about Indigenous people. I really do believe that people have a deep respect for Inuit and want to learn from Inuit. And I think because I believe that, those people are kind of, I'm like attracting those people. And maybe I ignore the ones that don't. And I think that that's the way the world works. That's just a value that I carry with me. But what I love about what we are all doing in this room is that we're carrying on what our ancestors did and always did. And we're doing it in our own way. We're rapping. We're writing books. We're writing books for kids. We're writing books for adults. We're creating films. We're opening up a window for the world to see our lives. And we're doing what our ancestors always did. We're just using modern tools and doing it in our own way. So thank you so much for creating this. It's really great that ICC have a writers festival. I hope that this could be I just love the idea of being in a circle of creative people. We feed off of each other. We learn from each other. And I want more.
At this point, we're going to be leaving it just for writers. So if you're not a writer, we're not to be in here. This is an opportunity for the emerging writers and the established writers. So if you're a writer, please stay and please have an open discussion, share with each other, share your knowledge, ask questions of each other, and please, this is your opportunity to connect with the emerging writers and for the emerging writers to connect with the established writers. I'm sure you have a lot of good advice to offer them, and I'm sure that they'd be happy to listen. So Eve, enjoy your next session. And just Napatsi will be facilitating this, so we will not be here. This will be for writers only.
Yes, thank you for participating.
All the writers. This is just writers, and this is your open discussion.